Hi everyone, welcome back with me, Mr. Yudi Wahyudin, in English Language Assessment class. In the last meeting, we have explored the basic concept of assessment from various experts, why assessment is important, key principles such as practicality, validity, reliability, authenticity, and what's back. We also have learned the differences between test, assessment, and evaluation. Before we go further, please tell me your understanding about previous materials on the comment section. Now, I would like to remind you again about the concept of assessments in language teaching. Assessment in language teaching refers to a systematic process of collecting, analyzing, and interpreting information about learners' language abilities in order to support learning and inform instructional decisions. Brown 2004 said that assessment is an ongoing process that encompasses a wide variety of methods used to understand what learners know and what they can do in language learning. Bachman and Palmer, 1996, assert that assessment is an attempt to gather information about a person's language ability which can be used to make inferences in authentic language use contexts. Genesi and Apter, 1996, pointed out that language assessment should be communicative, measuring the ability to use language in real-life situations rather than simply recalling grammatical rules. So, in conclusions, language assessment involves not only measuring the end product, but also monitoring the learning process. Assessment aims to provide feedback to both students and teachers to promote more effective, communicative, and meaningful learning. Now, let's discuss further about types of assessment in language teaching. The first is formative assessment. Assessment conducted during the learning process to provide feedback that supports students' ongoing improvement is called formative assessment. The purpose of formative assessment is to monitor students' progress continuously to inform the teacher's instructional strategies. For example, when you do writing tasks with the teacher feedbacks and also suggestion for revision, it is also a formative assessment. Group discussions that is observed and guided by the teachers is also one example of formative assessment. In an English class, students are asked to write a formal email and the teacher provides comments on structure, grammar, and tone for improvements. Second, summative assessment. Summative assessment is an assessment that is conducted at the end of a unit, terms, or course to evaluate students' overall achievement. The purpose of this assessment is to assign final grades or summarize the learning outcomes. For examples, the final exam at the end of the semesters, the standardized proficiency tests such as TOEFL and IELTS, and at the end of the semester, students take a comprehensive test that covers listening, reading, writing, and speaking skills. The third, diagnostic assessment. This assessment is conducted before instructions to identify students' strengths, weaknesses, and learning needs. The purpose of this assessment is to detect areas that require focused instructions and to design targeted learning plans. So when new students are tested in reading, listening, and basic grammar, based on the results, they are placed into suitable learning groups. For example, a grammar pretest to determine knowledge of verb tenses, and a vocabulary test to assess a language level of a learner. So, before starting a unit on reading comprehensions, the teachers may give students a short text and comprehension questions to identify their inference and reading skills. The fourth, placement assessment. This assessment is used to place students in the appropriate class or proficiency level. The purpose of this assessment is to group learners according to their existing language proficiency. For example, a placement test before starting to language programs to assign students to beginner, intermediate, or advanced skills. New students are tested in reading, listening, and basic grammar. Based on the results, they are placed into suitable learning groups. The fifth, Performance-based assessments. These assessments evaluate students' ability to perform real-life communicative language tasks. The purpose of this assessment is to know how well students can use the target language in context. For example, role-playing in a restaurant scenario, writing a report on a field trip, and delivering a formal presentation. In a German class or English class, students stimulate a conversation at an immigration office. The assessment focuses on vocabulary use, grammatical accuracy, and fluency. Another type of assessment is portfolio. Portfolio is a systematic collection of students' work over time that showcases their language development. The purpose of this assessment is to provide a holistic view of students' learning progress and to encourage self-reflections and learners' autonomy. For example, a collection of writing assignments from the beginning to the end of the course, or audio, video recordings of speaking tasks or presentations. Those can be collected into a portfolio. Students can compile their written assignments in a digital folders. At the end of the semester, they reflect on their improvement in writing style and grammar accuracy. So this is the implementations of portfolio. Now, let's summary these materials. Language assessments includes various types of each serving different purposes in teaching and learning process. Formative and summative assessments are based on the timing during or after the instructions. And we also have learned about diagnostic and placement assessments that are focused on identifying learners' entry-level skills and needs. And performance-based and portfolio assessment emphasize authentic language use and long-term development, while a combination of these assessments provides a more comprehensive picture of learners' language proficiency and support effective teaching practices. Now, let's take a look at the types of tests in language teaching. Language testing refers to a systematic method used to measure learners' language abilities across various skills such as listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It is also a linguistic components, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation that are covered in a language test. According to Brown 2004, a test is a method of measuring a person's ability, knowledge, or performance in a given domain. A good test must be systematic, reliable, and relevant to the language learning context. Hughes 2003 point out that language tests are designed to measure learners' proficiency in using the target language, not only knowledge about it. Bachman in 1990 tells that language tests not only measure linguistic knowledge, but also strategic and communicative competence in actual language use. In summary, a language test is a structured and standardized evaluation tool used to assess learners' actual ability to use the target language. It goes beyond grammar knowledge. It focuses on contextual and communicative language use. In a language teaching, there are various types of tests. Let's take a look at the first type of test, which is proficiency test. It's a kind of test that measures a learner's overall language ability, regardless of any specific course or curriculum. The purpose of this test is to evaluate a person's general command of the target language. For examples, TOEFL, IELTS, TOEIC, Duolingo, and so on and so forth. In a proficiency test, an applicant takes the IELTS or TOEFL test to prove their English proficiency for studying abroad, and this test evaluates all four skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing without referring to a specific syllabus. Another type of test is achievement test. This test is designed to evaluate what students have learned in relation to specific learning objective or particular syllabus. The purpose of this test is to assess how much of the taught material has been understood and retained by the students. For example, end-of-term English exams, a unit test, or a quiz to complete a topic in a certain English language skills. The real example of achievement test is that when the teacher gives a test consisting of multiple choice and short answer questions to evaluate students' understandings about passive voice after completing a certain unit or certain chapter. Number 3, placement test. This test is designed to determine students' language level so they can be placed in an appropriate class. The purpose of this test is to assign learners to the correct proficiency level before beginning a course. For examples, language school placement test covering grammar, reading, and speaking. And the scenario is that a new student takes a placement test at an English course center. Based on the results, the student is placed in an intermediate level class. Number 4, diagnostic test. This test is carefully designed to identify student-specific strengths and weaknesses in the language skills or components. The purpose of this test is to provide insights for instructional improvements and targeted interventions. For examples, a grammar test to assess understanding of present perfect tense, a listening task to identify difficulties with fast speech comprehension. Now, take a look at when the teacher notices students misusing have and has. A short diagnostic test is administered to identify the extent of the problem and adapt the teaching approach accordingly to solve the students' mistakes in using have and has. Number 5, aptitude test. This test measures an individual's natural ability or potential to learn a foreign language, not their current knowledge. The purpose of this test is to predict how successful a person will be in learning a second or foreign language. For examples, Modern Language Aptitude Test or MLAT, Primsleur Language Aptitude Battery, and so on and so forth. Another example is that before being selected as a diplomat, a candidate takes the MLAT to determine whether they have their natural aptitude to learn foreign languages quickly and efficiently. Okay, let's summarize the differences among those tests: placement, proficiency, and achievement tests. What are the key differences? The first, placement tests determine appropriate starting level, while proficiency tests measures overall language competence. Achievement tests assess learning outcomes based on a specific curriculum. Let's sum up these materials. Language tests vary depending on their purpose, whether to measure general proficiency, diagnose learning issues, assess progress, or place learners appropriately. A good test should be valid, reliable, practical, and appropriate for the intended use. Strategically, combining multiple test types provides a comprehensive picture of learners' language ability and supports more effective teaching and learning decisions. Everyone, let's take a look at the principle and criteria of good tests in language teaching. This is a very important material for prospective teachers. A good test in language teaching is a systematically designed, valid, reliable, and fair assessment tool that accurately measures learners' language ability and supports effective teaching and learning. According to Brown 2004, a good test must meet the fundamental principles of validity, reliability, practicality, authenticity, and washback. Hughes 2003 said that a good test is one which is valid, reliable, and practical. It should also reflect actual language use and provide useful feedback. Bachman and Palmer 1996 emphasized that a good language test must have usefulness, which consists of 6 key qualities: reliability, construct validity, authenticity, interactiveness, impact, and practicality. In conclusions, a good test should not only assess learners' linguistic knowledge, but also be dependable, contextually appropriate, unbiased, and encourage meaningful language use. The quality of a test is determined by how well it fulfills these key principles. After learning each type of assessment and test, let's discuss the conclusions. A good language test should accurately and consistently measure relevant language skills. It is also need to be feasible to implement in actual educational settings. The test or assessment should use authentic tasks that mirror real-life communications. It also encourages positive learning outcomes and positive watchback. And the test or assessment should be fair and unbiased towards all learners. Assessment and testing in language teaching come in various types, such as formative, summative, diagnostic, and placement, each serving to support effective learning. A good test must fulfill the criteria and principles including validity, reliability, practicality, authenticity, positive watchback, and objectivity. By applying appropriate assessment types and sound testing principles, language learning becomes more focused, fair, and positively impactful on students' language development. That is all about the second meeting of English language assessment class. If you have any opinion or questions, just type it in the comment sections. Thank you and see you in the next meeting.